right, welcome back. And in case you're just joining us, we are having a conversation, just doing a post-mortem of the Africa Climate Summit. And we are just talking about the way forward here in studio. I have a panel of three gentlemen: Engineer Festus Ngeno, the Principal Secretary from the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. Also with us is Dean Bebe, who is an activist, and Peter Odhengo, the Head of Climate Finance and Green Economy Unit, also the Project Coordinator of Flocka. And I just want to, speaking of which, this Flocka, we saw your team, Peter, deliver a 7.2 billion shillings check to counties under the Flocka program. I just want to understand briefly the initiative, the idea behind it, and what is it that you envision to achieve even by just investing these funds?
Thank you very much. First of all, it was not 7.2. It was 7.387 billion.
To be precise.
To be precise. To the
Okay. Okay.
But the good thing is that, let me just digress a little bit on my PS. Inclusivity is a relative term. It depends on the depth and the extent of inclusivity in that. But the good thing that when we are talking about, Flocka supported the civil society, I think, all over the country. And they had one of the best meetings in Safari Park with this support. But the other good thing which happened in Nairobi, that a number of countries' delegations are here. Today, from yesterday to today, we have a delegation from Tanzania, almost over 20 people, learning on how Flocka model can be replicated in their countries. That is quite positive. We had the president of Sierra Leone joining our president, Dr. Samoei William Ruto, in delivering this check, issuing this check. And if you can follow his statement, he said precisely, he applauded Kenya. Kenya has shown the way in leading on how to mobilize climate finance in scale, decentralize that money, make the money reach the lowest possible person who is at the front line of the impact of climate change. And that is at the world level. So the design and the theory and the philosophy behind financing locally led climate action, which we started designing far much in 2019, is really how to build the capacity of the national government. And I'm happy the PS Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, and Forest and Climate Change is part and parcel of this. And this program cut across all forms of government, from the national now to the decentralized subnational. And then from subnational, it is the first ever program that has now brought in government financing activities at the village level. Two, it is a well-thought program. Never before such a multilateral bank like World Bank committed and given and approved 150 million to be taken to the front line to build the local resilience of the local communities and ecosystems in a scale and in a positive design. Three, the program is designed where it is not Peter Odhengo, it is not PS Engineer Ngeno here with me, it is not my brother here to make a decision. It is a blank check. The way the president gave it is the way it is given through the counties to the local communities to decide, identify, and implement their climate resilience challenges that are affecting them.
So sort of like home-based solutions for their...
It is truly home-based solution, African-led by African and for the local pesa masinani. The check in itself is just one of the checks because the program has got two types of grant. The first grant is institutional, county institutional support grant. That is $100,000 per year for 3 years, or 11 years per year for 3 years, to build the capacity of the counties. Because when we did the analysis, we found that there were technical capacity gaps. And because the local solution, we do not believe in providing TAs some of the young university students from the north to come and confuse our grandmothers in the village. No, they know what they want, and that is why the PS said, even indigenous people were here, they have indigenous knowledge. This is designed, give them the money in scale and sustainable to design their own solution. Then once they fix the problems of the capacity, then now they are ready now to access the real grant. And that real grant, it is equitable. It is an average of $1.52 million per year for the next 4 years, or about 137 million Kenya shillings going into a county per year for the next. And we are still mobilizing more. Those are checks that are going to the people to make the decision.
Is it for all counties?
Great. It is for all counties. But
did all counties receive? Will they?
All counties did not receive. It is performance-based. You have to design policies and meet minimum criteria. It is result, P for R, result-based. So if you don't meet those simple basic results, you don't get it.
So how many counties received?
The check which was delivered was for 44 counties. Unfortunately and regrettably, Nairobi, where you are sitting, missed it out. Then the other one which missed it out is Mombasa. Then the third one is Kiambu. Although maybe you people in Nairobi are rich, you may not need it. But
is it about being rich or not?
We don't know. There are a number of poor people in slums here that need the climate finance more than even some people in the village. How they missed it, they know. We are still following. Yesterday we had a team of United Cities and local authorities that we are partnering with. We took that matter with them. The Secretary General was in our office, and they are picking it up because Flocka is designed with a philosophy that no one should be left behind, but no one should pull others behind.
All right.
So if Nairobi is pulling any county behind, all the 44 must go and pull it up.
Okay. But do you think, there's been a lot of talk about how much we are investing in terms of addressing the impact of climate change, and even now beginning to appreciate the role that communities played to make such initiatives community-led, community-driven. Is money what we need, or it's something else?
Thanks. I think money is what we need, and so many more other things. There are many underlying issues that entrap us as a continent. Now, I think if there is a grant that's gone out there for locally led solutions, fantastic. But, Kenya has GMOs at the same time. So what ideology is being driven around the grant that's been given, and what is it based on, and what's fueling that grant? There's the whole notion around seed law as well in the country as well, and how does that interpret to building towards resilience pathways, as my previous speaker said. In terms of structural traps, I think one thing that I'd like to talk about briefly is when the World Bank started in the 1940s through, the Bretton Woods system and the structural adjustment programs were birthed, there were no African countries independent, except for a few. Meaning that, that system that determines our new economic activity back then was actually implemented in a time of colonialism and perpetuating inequality. And the big question that we need to ask now is that why are we still being detected by the same, system to detect how money is funneled in and outside of between the global south and the global north? And those are one of the structural, traps that Africa is significantly, trapped in. And I think one of the key things that will come out is that we're trapped in a cycle of debt. And that is also fueled by the fact that, when we export or in the import market, for example, we're trading in a currency that's not even our very own. That means that we have to, fall in line with the changing market rates and exchange rates, meaning that we are caught in a cycle of debt. So I think over yearly, I think the start was done in 2015, yearly Africa loses over $2 trillion, over such structural traps. And I believe that's something that we need to fundamentally address. I think the summit, for example, spend over $30 million to prepare for it. And then we have big polluting countries like the United States coming and pledging another 30 million, just simply cancelling the money that was put in to bring everyone together into this space. And that is not ambitious. If anything, it's an insult to African countries to be invited on African soil as the biggest polluter and make such a commitment. But so, yes, the issue is money, but the issue is there are also underlying structural traps that need to be addressed holistically.
What do you think, PS? How do we approach this? There's this conversation about how much money is being put into it, and also the fear that we could just be commercializing this climate change agenda. And how do we How do we change the narrative to stay on track, to stay on course, and look at the bigger picture, which is the problem that we are trying to address?
Precisely, and that is why this summit is about changing the narrative on climate finance. But allow me to just mention two things about the Flocka program. As Peter mentioned, it is one of the bottom-up economic transformational model in terms of climate finance, and especially to local communities. We did design it, so privileged to be being part and parcel of the team that worked on it. I used to work in the county, so I know what counties require. We know the challenges are the three counties that did miss the grants and the investments, and I think the ministry of my ministry, where I sit as a Principal Secretary, Environment and Climate Change, and Treasury is working closely to be able to work out on the three counties to benefit. It is supposed to be for all the counties. And the institutional grants are supposed to build resilience within the various institutions and also the communities. So it is one of the critical aspects. So in terms of the narrative and the question you've asked, now this summit was about changing the narrative, that we don't want this lamentation of global south versus global north, but we are presenting opportunities as African nations that we can be at the table for solution. And you've heard the President mentioning this all over the time. That is why the conversation on the financial architecture of the multilateral development banks was a critical center, was at the center stage of the conversations. When the declarations come out, you'll be able to see the various call to action aspects on how the multilateral development banks are supposed to reform, to respond faster to the issues of climate emergencies in Africa and the rest of the world. Because we are, as we speak, we are not talking about global warming. We are talking about global melting, global boiling, and all of us, whether global south, global north, if we don't work together and provide solutions, we are all going to perish. And that's one of the key things that is important for us to be able to understand. So in terms of financing, the SDRs issues and how this needs to be focused on, the urgency, the three things that we were looking at in this summit was the scale at which we are responding, the agility or the speed, again, in how we are supposed to respond, and also the fiscal space on how African countries are supposed to get the financing. We keep on referring to the 2009 $100 billion promise, which has not been able to be realized. But we are saying, can the African nation be at the desk, at the table to discuss solutions? That is why the four things came out very clearly at the declaration. We have critical minerals. We are saying, can the value of minerals be done in Africa? That value addition, instead of exporting, that importing again back. The carbon sinks, the issues of forests. We have abundant resources in that aspect. The renewable energy, the Sahel region, even in Kenya alone, we can be able to power Africa or quite a number of countries in the Sahel region using renewable energy, and now also the carbon sinks in terms of the forests that we have, the opportunities that lies within us, the arable land that's available for food security, which is important for us as African nation. So the conversation is about driving the positive green growth for Africa. And I think one of the key things that we are going forward into COP28, into the NSG conference, the summit. Remember, COP28 is a COP of accountability. The things that we promise are going to be accounted in COP28. The global stock stake is what is going to be the topic of discussion. So we are saying, can the African nations be, have a united voice that we can be able to be at the table and negotiate and provide solutions to the rest of the world. Right. So, and we did achieve that it is summit. It is important that it's not lost at any given time.
All right. And a question just came in for you, Peter. Somebody's asking, what conditions should a county meet to be eligible for this grant, and how many counties received? I think it's 44 counties that received?
Yes.
You said 3 didn't. So
3, we have given 2 grants.
Uh-huh.
The first county capacity building institutional grant, the first one was given in April. That one, 45 counties met the conditions, okay, and they got it. Then the second one, which we've just given in July, is where 44 got. What are the conditions? Yeah. The conditions are very simple. It's very simple. 1, a county must have Climate Change Act, because we need a regulatory framework, because at the national level, we have the Climate Change Act 2016 as amended recently. So within that act, there is a requirement that all counties need to customize that act to enable them undertake their own local circumstances. So one of the conditions to access Flocka funds, counties through their county assembly are supposed to enact Climate Change Act. 2, there is a requirement that we need to set up a climate change fund. This climate change fund is set under what we call opening of a special purpose account. And within that act, it provides a provision for a county to set up a fund with a fund manager. The third one is a county must dedicate, a county should dedicate at least 1.5% of its development funds to that special purpose account, climate change account. Number 4, a county should designate a CEC in charge of climate change affairs in the counties. And then finally, should set up county climate change. Very simple. Those things were required as early as 2016. But the good thing with Flocka, within the last 1 year, and I thank the PS, Engineer Ngeno here, we worked tirelessly, and 45 met all those basic conditions in the first one. Now, the second one, for you now to get the grant, those institutional support and capacity, now you have to get the minimum access condition, which are very simple because we designed for Africa, by Africa. It is a catalytic effect to enable them have good governance, good institutional capacity, demonstrate that they have the money as a channel to reach the lowest possible part of the county. But the good thing is that it is not punitive. If you miss today, work hard and access it tomorrow.
I'm surprised that Nairobi, where this summit was being held, did not qualify, but it's a random thought. Bebe, you know, it's good that the PS and Peter are here, and I want you to tell us what you think is usually the problem. Especially, we've had concerns about this money not getting to the people who need it. Okay, there's a lot that has been done, a lot has been invested, but if you go to the communities, in fact, we may start well, but a few months or a few years down the line, the vision that was supposed to be, determine the success of this particular project is no longer there. Projects are stalling, money is being misused, misappropriated. What are the missing links if you go down to the villages where this is supposed to be impacting?
Oh yeah, thank you. I think there is a strong need for transparency and accountability, and that needs to be a bottom-up approach. So I'm glad that there's a locally led solution at play, but then how do we then create a framework that's inclusive, that is transparent, and through that there's accountability. I think, corruption is obviously something that's of, strong significance when we're considering how monies are channeled, from communities. And at the same time, what's also important is good governance. So how do we fuse the two? So I believe the criteria that has been established, or the indicators that has been established by the engineer, I think would be implemented and operationalized in a manner that accounts for challenges such as corruption. And I believe such indicators would also foster, transparency, as I have put it out. But however, I think for me in closing around this issue is, when we look at multilateral development banks, right, essentially in this instance, it's very important, right? But we have a food security crisis in Africa. We have locally led solutions. But fundamentally, are those actually locally led? Because currently, the African Development Bank, for example, only funds climate resilient projects. By that I mean climate smart agriculture in comparison to locally led solutions like agroecology. So again, we are talking about arable land, but because through issues and forces such as climate smart agriculture, we're actually degrading our arable land, meaning in the next 10 to 50 years, we won't have that arable land that we speak of because of issues such as climate smart agriculture. Again, there's a lack of a fossil fuel finance exclusion policy that currently exists, and that's embedded within how we understand the socio-political dynamics at play here. And the resultant of that is how then to achieve renewable energy initiatives. If currently what governs our African development banks, whose main mandate is to tackle poverty and energy access, is being driven by a policy that does not include, that does not exclude fossil fuels. So that means that whatever is coming to the multilateral development bank systems are non-bankable projects because they're not acknowledging renewable energy. And this again is reasserted through the recently released, I think it was 2 days ago, the AFDB and the IEA released the joint report on the Clean Energy Report that clearly states that gas will continue to play a role in Africa's future and would pave a way inevitably to renewable energy, which is problematic on different levels because, gas is obviously is not a transition fuel. So these are the certain elements that I want to touch on. But just to answer your first question, I believe those indicators will provide that role. But I'm also happy, that the principal did also talk around the role that multilateral development banks have to play in this conversation.
All right. So Bebe, let's assume that by having the Africa Climate Summit, Africa went to the doctor and we were seeking diagnosis just to be able to discuss what is wrong with the continent and how best can we solve it. And also appreciate, declarations and investments that were commitments that were made. A good example is just what we were talking about here. Let's assume that we went to the doctor and we want to know where the problem is. From where you sit, Bebe, if we are to invest this money in the right places, if we are to do the right thing going forward, what would you say are these problems that I would call disease that Africa is suffering from? Where you would say this money, now that we have it, plus Flocka and others, we had so much that was committed, billions of shillings that is going to be invested in addressing the impact of climate change. If we are to put this money in the right place, where would that be from where you sit?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think, first of all, renewable energy solutions are one of the most important elements in this aspect. Number one, when we're looking to addressing energy access in Africa. The second important aspect is we're going to address the food security crisis in Africa and also provide and unlock food sovereignty. We need to drive that agenda through organic farming and agroecology methods and not climate-smart agriculture. So essentially, we've got two elements that seek to tackle that. And at the same time, we need to also then understand that we need to start beginning to speaking to each other and opening up our trade markets and our border markets. In terms of when we're trading with each other. And because at the end of the day, you have to answer the question, why are we in a system where we have to seek food aid when we actually have arable land right now, but we seek food aid from countries outside Africa? That is a problem on its own. That means we need to begin to invest into systems and food systems that actually empower us as Africans. And I believe one of the major challenges right now is food and energy access. Because, for example, right now, women are the most vulnerable when it comes to energy access issues because they spend the entire day bending over. That's why they've got many spinal injuries because they've got no alternatives to clean cooking as a result of the historical legacy that fossil fuels have left on the continent in. And that is something that needs funding to be tackled and to be addressed. On the other end, there's a food security crisis. Yes, it's also being exacerbated by fossil fuels, but at the same time, it has their underlying structural traps that Africa is trapped in, where we need to start speaking together as Africans to create a trading bloc where we actually help each other and have that spirit of Ubuntu.
All right. So PS, if you were to take this, look at it in a wider perspective, how does the outcome of the summit that we just concluded in Nairobi align with the global climate change agenda and commitments that have been made before, such as the international agreements outside, examples such as the Paris Agreement? I mean, how does it fit in that particular space? Thank you.
Allow me first to also comment on what Peter mentioned and what Peter has mentioned on the locally led solution, the Flocka. It is financing the locally led solution, the building resilience of community, which is also important. In the ministry where I'm the principal secretary in charge of environment and climate change, we have the Climate Change Directorate domicile, which is responsible for reporting on the national determinant contributions for the country and reporting to the UNFCCC for purposes under the Paris Agreement. So the locally led solution, Flocka, the county government, the CCUs that Peter mentioned, the climate change units, is so important. That is why we have anchored this program under what we are calling the National Climate Change Action Plan 3 now, 2023-2024, 2027, which was part of the documents that we did launch when we were launching Flocka. So Flocka is going to finance critically the instruments that are responsible for us to be able to meet our international obligations under the Paris Agreement, NCAP and the CCU. So it is important that those connect. That is why the State Department of Environment and Climate Change and Treasury, where Flocka is domiciled, we are critically part of the important implementing agencies, our departments in this Flocka program, including the Council of Governors, of course, because we work with the county governments. Coming to the matter that you put it, the conversation on the outcomes is also important. As I did indicate that COP28 is a COP of accountability. It's about taking stock, global stock take on what we've been able to promise and looking at what the narrations that we've been able to put in place. That is why we want to change the narrative, and it's important that that comes out, and that has been the rallying call on this summit. Changing the narrative that we want no longer want to be, and he mentioned it very clearly in terms of the debt that we have as African nations, in terms of, and the debt comes as a result of climate issues. You are aware that, for example, let me just contextualize this. In Kenya, we lost about 2.5 million heads of livestock during during the drought. Yeah. And the monies that were meant for development were, as President mentioned, were moved to be able to salvage that issue. And therefore, that the development of the country is sabotaged or is impeded by putting monies that were not meant for that particular program in a different place. So the issue is about providing solutions, driving the positive green growth. And I agree, renewable energy, which was one of the top conferences that we have had, the available land, the abundant resources in terms of land for food security is so important. And I agree, Africa needs adaptation and adaptation financing. And it is important that comes out also in respect in how we are going to move forward into COP28. And if you look at the declarations and what we've been able to put in place, is trying not to, the blame game is not one of the key things that we are focusing. We want to just focus on the solutions in what we have offered in this conversation. The African Development Bank have what we are calling the compact tracks on adaptation. We hope that is going to see driven into fruition, and it's one of the key things that we were able to canvass through in the summit. So we are hoping that as we go to COP28 as a united African voice on climate finance, we were able to come out with tangible conversations, and that we want to make sure that Africa knows that we don't want to be the victims. We want to provide solutions, and we have the abundant resources as a country, as a nation, or as a continent to be able to deliver on that.
All right. That's a question just came in for you. Ask the PS, aside from financing, what other strategies or initiatives have been put in place by the government to champion climate action?
Thank you so much. One of I will mention three things, apart from Flocka, which of course is critical, as you mentioned. We have the 15 billion tree campaign, the ecosystem restoration program. That is already a program that is being supported, and we are working to make sure that we increase our forest cover or tree cover from 12.8% to 30% by 2030. So that's one of the critical programs that already have been canvassed and entrenched in our programs. Secondly, is also to look at, and of course that one provides carbon sinks in terms of when you have good forest cover, you have good carbon sinks, therefore you are able to manage your emissions. So to sequester a lot of carbon, the number of kilotons of carbon dioxide would be sequestered when you have a good forest cover is important for us. Secondly, is on circular economy in terms of waste management, which of course we are driving that agenda to be able to mitigate the issues of methane emissions or gas emissions, greenhouse gases emissions, and that it will enable us to stop the issues of pollution. And then thirdly is to look at the renewable energy programs that we are running through also with the Ministry of Energy. We are working closely to be able to work on that, to make sure that we have clean cooking solutions, for example, that we don't need to use the wood fuel, but we have alternative clean cooking solutions for us to be able to bring down the green gas emissions.
Well said. Now that you mentioned green gas, Bebe, what's your take on carbon tax? We've had also a very big debate around the carbon credits. And I just want to hear your thoughts on this direction and this trajectory of addressing the impact of climate change.
I mean, I think it's simple. I mean, towards a full solution. You know, essentially, carbon tax and carbon credits are just giving a license to polluters to continue polluting. You cannot say that you want to solve and create funds by, number one, planting trees so you can buy, you know, more carbon credit in order for you to continue, you know, functioning in the same system that put you in this very same problem that you're in now. So essentially, you're just creating a cycle of need-want, essentially, because what you're doing is you're buying time. And because, as my previous speaker said, you know, we're no longer at global warming, we're at a global boiling point. We cannot be buying time. We need fundamental, you know, solutions that are authentic and mindful. And carbon credits and carbon tax really just provides us with a full solution that allows the polluter to continue polluting. And again, you know, as mentioned, you know, there are many programs, even right now, that are being launched regarding planting trees and afforestation and et cetera, et cetera. What does that essentially mean, you know, for the energy system then, if you are just fundamentally doing that to continue doing A, B, and C? That has led you to a climate crisis again. So you're in a never-ending cycle where you plant trees, you cut them down because, you know, fossil fuels, major driver biodiversity loss. You buy carbon credit again, you get money around that aspect. There's still the notion around the climate emergency that's still not yet managed, because we're not trying to manage, you know, emissions as a continent. We're actually trying to stop and avoid them totally. So the conversation should not be about managing emissions. It's about how do we avoid and stop emissions. And I believe carbon credits and carbon tax do not touch on those two.
That's why, and I want you.
Can I just get into
will,
that?
And that's why I asked. You know, could we just be missing the point by having, you know, commercialization of this whole, you know?
This is science.
How do we stop when we can make money out of it?
When we talk of science, we need to be very careful.
Yeah.
Carbon credits is not supposed to allow anybody to continue polluting. Yeah. Carbon credit was designed in California in the late 90s to avoid pollution. And what does it mean? It means that for you to shift from a manufacturing perspective, for a company to shift to a green, new, low carbon emission technology, you have to invest a lot of money to move towards that. Now, why did carbon credits come? It's called cap and trade. It means that there are companies that are already entrenched in the business of production. Because listen, climate change, we also have to look at the humanity and the livelihood support. If you put emission reduction, for example, when you are manufacturing food, for example, using the old technology, it means you have to shut up that company. If you shut up that company because the technology is polluting, then it now means that the people, again, counterproductive, will lose. So cap and trade was brought in to allow companies to continue emitting to a certain extent for a given period.
No, so it was supposed to be progressive.
It is progressive, it is innovative to reduce, but that cap, where beyond you pass that, is now where somebody that cannot innovate, another company that cannot invest in that technology now buys that. When you buy that carbon, it's called CO2 equivalent, carbon dioxide CO2 equivalent. It is not that carbon. It is an equivalent of an X tons of carbon dioxide emission. So if you don't understand science, don't talk it. Secondly, climate smart agriculture. What is smart agriculture? Smart agriculture means it is an agriculture that adopts the new technologies which is compatible with climate change. And what is climate change? It means that we are now living in a warmer environment. There is not enough water, for example. Now, climate smart agriculture means you stop flooding your rice field, for example. You go to highland rainfed areas. You now use drip irrigation, precise irrigation, which is now digitalized, like the one in Israel. What does that one mean? Now use water efficiently, because we are now in a scarce water world because of the warming. When now we go into the energy efficiency, which now in the climate science terminology is now minimizing emission. And when we talk about emission, which is mitigation, on the other side, in climate change, we have two terms. There is mitigation and there is adaptation. Yeah. And adaptation is linked with building the resilience. Mitigation is now where the polluters now mitigate. It means that they reduce the emission to a lower level of what is now termed 2%, below 2%. If you go into the Paris Agreement, that is the agreement, below 2%. Now, to get that to below 2%, now you go into the Paris Agreement, Article 9, which has got 3 components. 1, capacity building, which Flocka is providing to the national governments and also to the local level. Number 2, technology transfer. This technology transfer is now what we mean now within those trading systems, within those markets, now means that you change from the old polluting technology into a new technology, or for example, renewable energy. Now you need to transfer. But what did not come out in the outcome of the Nairobi summit? Those technologies needed to be transferred free of charge. Because they are expensive. You cannot access them. So the true debate now means that if these people were genuine, although we were African ourselves here, so we were genuine to ourselves, but the others must now bring that technology without that overhanging cost. And then the third one is now the finance. The finance must be available in three things. 1, it must be in scale. Scale means huge, because we need $1.7 trillion per year up to 2030 to reach, I know the PS will talk net zero by 2050. $1.7 trillion. So we need money in scale. The unfortunate thing, Africa has never accessed this money all along. Statistics are saying, 10%. I hear some 10% of the climate finance flowing into Africa. It is not true. It is 4%. And that 4%, over the 4% which is flowing to Africa, 80% is going to mitigation, renewable energy. Only less than 30% is going to adaptation. And adaptation is what the people on the front line require. Okay, Peter. Finally, it's not about the outcome. Declarations have been made right from 1992.
This is not the first one.
It's not the first one. What needs to be done? Let's take our own local solution, scale them up. Reforming the multilateral banks or development partner is a good thing, but it has to be reformed up to the local financial institution. In the National Treasury, we started those reforms in 2013-2009. That is now where we have yielded this Flocka coming up. And now we have something to show and export to other African countries. This is what is important.
Yes, I want you to also weigh in on that debate. Because there's that fear that, fine, it's supposed to be progressive and to allow those who are polluting the environment time to be able to. But then, what's your take? I just want to hear also your take on how this approach is working and whether it's helping us to get to where we want to get to.
Thank you so much. And I think the excitement that I have is the fact that we are discussing about carbon credits and carbon tax for the very first time. And this came as a result of our realization that none of our laws in Kenya had carbon credits or carbon tax embedded. And therefore, we took the initiative as government to make sure that we amend the Climate Change Act of 2016 to incorporate carbon credits or carbon trading as explained, as mentioned by my colleagues. And this is one of the critical aspects. Now, the reason why we did this is because there has been voluntary projects or carbon trading happening in the country, and the communities have not been benefiting out of the credits, as Peter put it, and as colleagues put it, in any sense. Just to mention to you that over 20% of the carbon trading that happened in Africa is from Kenya. But I can tell you, until the president assented to the act just a week ago, the government of Kenya could not pinpoint where these tradings is happening, because it was voluntarily, and yet we didn't have a law to be able for us to be able to check on what's happening in these carbon tradings. That is why we did the initiative and say we need to amend the Climate Change Act of 2016 to incorporate carbon trading. I can tell you we've gone through rigorous processes. It was not an easy to get to the law to be amended, especially before. The issue was not even targeting the summit, but we wanted to showcase the process. We did 60 days of public participation on that. And the reason why we brought in the carbon trading or carbon markets, we wanted to have a legal and policy framework for government to be able to know what's happening in the space of carbon trading. To provide transparency, to provide good environment for business trading. This is anchored under Paris 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, and therefore there is a voluntary carbon market trading, there is the compliance market, which we are going to be progressing. So even as we do the voluntary carbon markets trading, we wanted to make sure that the government knows what's happening. I can tell you, as we move to the regulations in the next few days, which we'll be able to publish, the government is going to be taking seriously an understanding of what's happening within the space of carbon markets. We are going to be creating...
even as you continue,
yes,
what do you tell those who feel, okay, we don't need this money, not in this form. What we want is the pollution to stop.
Agreed.
Not to make money.
I totally agree. But the point is, and I am happy the way Peter has explained, it is supposed to be progressive. You know, we are talking about the carbon credits, which is a trading mechanism for us to be able to mitigate or and provide solutions in terms of how we are supposed to do emissions. So the issue of us having this transparency in terms of how communities are going to benefit. I think one of the key things is important for us to highlight the achievements within the law that has just been ascended on the amended Climate Change Act of 2023. That 40% of all the benefits of carbon markets or carbon projects are going to go to the communities, especially land-based ones, and at least 40%. In fact, that is a term used, at least 40%. That means it can be more. If you tell me now how communities are benefited, I can't be able to pinpoint. But because we didn't have that access or that process in as government to be able to take that initiative. Secondly, under the non-land-based programs, we are going to get at least 25%. And one of the key things that I need to mention here, and which is important for us in this amended act, is a national designated authority that would be responsible for registering all the carbon markets or projects within the country for us to be able to know what's happening.
Well said.
And that is where now the issues of carbon tax is going to come in. You cannot talk about carbon tax when you don't know what's happening in the environment. So I can be able to...
don't have the legal framework for it.
Yeah, so now we have a legal framework and we appreciate
Allow
that.
me to cut you short because I want to sample a few tweets from our viewers before you wind up this conversation. I'll get a final round of your comments once I'm done with this. But we invited you to share with us your thoughts also on this conversation that we are having. And this is what you're saying online on social media at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Acheng. And the hashtag is Daybreak. We appreciate those who've taken time to share with us your thoughts. And of course, we have Honorable Lilian Sioi. You say, I believe that Kenyans are now wiser on matters climate change. The summit really did open our eyes where we might have been ignorant or less knowledgeable. Thank you for that. We have Sir Nixon, and you say the climate change summit declaration should be commensurate to our pockets if the common man on the grassroots has anything to do with it. For instance, the electric vehicle mobility should be pocket-friendly, not the 2 million mini cars. Okay. The just concluded Africa Climate Summit has yielded fruits by bridging the divide and presented a united African voice ahead of COP28 meeting. That's Bob Otieno Owino. And we have, you know, one more, just looking at what others are saying also at Okelo Mwalimu. You say it's utterly appalling that none of the heads of state from major polluters attended the Africa Climate Summit. I'm very sure that if such a summit could have been organized in, let's say, Europe, almost all African heads of state could have attended and loaded onto buses like school kids. Okay. Okay. We have Ibrahim Bakari, you say, in a bid to ensure that our efforts towards climate change bear fruit, the Nairobi Declaration should be cascaded down in all counties of the partner nations for strict and effective enforcement. We have Godi Barasa, where all stakeholders of climate change must get down to scrutinizing the Nairobi Declaration and ensure that there is no legal gaps that might inhibit the progress of putting Mother Nature in a good environmental shape. Thank you, Godi. We have, let me take one more. Remy Butia, you're saying at the heart of the climate challenge are two gaps we urgently need to bridge, the ambition and the investment gap. Today, localizing is the new globalization, and cities and regions around the world have demonstrated their leadership. Great insights there you're sharing with us on social media, and we appreciate you taking time to share with us your thoughts. This we do each and every day. Please interact with us. Tell us as much as you can what you think about the conversations we're having in studio. And I just want to give my guests a final round of closing remarks. I'll begin with you, Bebe. We've said so much about where we missed, where we gained, you know, post even the Africa Climate Summit. As your parting shot, as we move into this trajectory of trying to work within our communities to, you know, begin to change the narrative a little bit and also prepare ourselves for negotiating our interest at COP28, what would be your closing remarks on how best we can utilize this opportunity?
Thank you. No, I think stronger call for investment into renewable energy is very important. Fostering knowledge systems based on indigenous knowledge in order to foster locally led sustainable solutions are very much important. Phasing out fossil fuels as well comes very much into play when we're looking ahead of COP28, and something that needs to be negotiated heavily for Africa. Carbon markets are not a solution. You know, the speaker said that they were birthed in California, which is fantastic. California constantly has burning fires every year. So if that is the progressive nature that we're looking for as African countries, then sure, allow the continent to burn, you know, but California is in a crisis as a result of that system that's being spoken of here today. And lastly, you know, when we do talk about, you know, the endorsement of the declaration, we're not saying that the space was not meant to be convened. We appreciate that, but we do believe that of 500 CSOs across Africa have flagged this summit as an issue regarding inclusivity and also how matters were addressed. But at the same time, there wouldn't have been a People's Declaration if we actually had inclusivity. So we cannot say we were inclusive because we accepted the People's Declaration. The mere fact that it currently exists, that means that there's a gap in the system, which is why there was a need for a People's Declaration. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know what you think, Peter. As we close this conversation, what would be your parting shot?
Two things. There is fire in Greece, which has been intense. There has been fire in Canada. There has been fire even here. But the only good thing with California, it is the silicon of all what investment, the new innovation starts from California. And the California economy, GDP, is bigger than the entire African countries. Good, because of what they showed. But now my clarion call now is that we don't need to keep on having negativity. Kenya, the National Treasury, Ministries of Finance are very difficult and very complex. We have opened the way, we have committed the money, and all the counties and all the 1,450 wards have got the money now. You, Sefina Chieng, go home. Be a member of your ward committee. I appeal to my brother here. Go home to your ward. If you are a Kenyan man, I appeal to my peers. Mimi nitaenda Kisumu yangu. Nikae kama mwenye chama ya hiyo committee, so that I can now guide those, my old mother, that there is money here. How do we build our resilience? If we can do that, because it is all over, we will be the happiest. When you finish your activism, when you finish your policy, when you finish your announcement, go back home over the weekend, sit with the county climate change committees in the ward, go to your county, scrutinize how much have they received, how much have they put down, how much have they disbursed. If we Kenyans do that, we will change this county for us. Talk, talk, talk. NATO is called. NATO means nothing happening, talk only, must now stop. We need money. The money is available. We are still mobilizing more because we need more. Go home, work from today.
Mm-hmm. You said something earlier that caught my attention. This is not the first declaration to be made. We've had several. These are not the first commitments we're hearing. We've had several. If you were to advise the continent on how to make it different this time, what would you say?
One, the continent has waken up. We have our own internal resources. Africa, we are on our own. Kenya, we realize we are on our own. Let's use what we have, our minerals, our natural resources, protect our ecosystem, our biodiversity, put them into our GDP, and stop talks in loud voices. It doesn't add value. At the end of the day, the people we are talking with are viewing climate change as a business. But for us, it is life and death. Let's stop talking with the businessmen. Let's save life. Africa has realized that. They are here. And within the South, I am optimistic we are going to make it.
Too much talk. Time for action now. I want to also hear from you, PS. What's the future looking like? Are we going to have another such forum? And for us, even if there is going to be another, how do we sit down and talk about successes and not the misses? How do we get to a space where we will be discussing different agendas and not the same old issues that we've decried about over the years as a continent? What will make that dream come to reality?
Thank you so much. I think on the onset is the person driving this agenda, His Excellency the President. I want to congratulate him as the leader of CAHOS for convening this with the AU and achieving the African Declaration process that we've had on the various thematic areas that we discussed, driving the green growth, positive green growth for Africa on climate finance is one of the key things that we anticipated. And one of the key things that on the successes going forward is that we decided the president being on the driving seat, and for him things get done. I am optimistic. I'm working in the executive that this is going to be one of the biggest successes going into COP28. The various aspects of the declaration, which I am indicated will come out, is that this summit, of course, agreed by the African leaders, we are going to have it in 2 years' time, biannually. And therefore, one of the key things that we are working on towards as we go to COP is how do we institutionalize the processes and provide solutions as African nations in terms of climate finance, in terms of adaptation and building the resilience. So I want to mention that this is one of the successes, and I'm positive within myself, having been part of the process, that this is going to be a game changer. Yes, we have had various declarations, but I want to assure you that we've never had an African voice, a united voice of African leaders coming together ahead of a major conference of parties coming up in November, December in the UAE. So it is going to be we are going to build up the processes in UNSC, as I've indicated, in the next 10 days, and moving on to COP28. And going into the AU even in next year, February, as he convenes the CAHOS meetings. So it is important that that line of thought comes out very clearly. And as a ministry responsible for climate change, we are appreciative of the fact that they have critical conversations of financing that we were able to achieve. The Flocka is one of them under the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
We have got the National Climate Change Action Plan Phase 3, which is 2023-2027, which is an implementing program, which requires up to $62 billion on adaptation, as Peter mentioned earlier on. And then also we have got the long-term resilience programs, emission strategy, which is for the entire country again, looking at our various emissions programs, whether in energy, whether in agriculture, in transport, it's a whole government approach. So in terms of looking forward is to just mention that this was a successful summit. I want to mention that. And therefore, we are looking forward to now having the implementation programs coming out of it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. I hope there will be activities to track progress before the 2 years, so that we just don't wait for 2 years to be surprised.
Yeah.
We look at how we are progressing in terms of meeting our obligations and commitment as a continent. And I hope that, in the near future, we'll be talking about how much we've been able to achieve as a continent. Engineer Festus Ngeno is the Principal Secretary from the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Forestry. And of course, we've also been having a sit down with Peter Odhengo. Peter heads the Climate Finance and Green Economy Unit, also project coordinator for the Flocka program. And we also have been sitting down this morning with Dean Bebe, who is an activist, also sharing his thoughts on the hits and the misses and what needs to be done right for us to be able to save our continent and the entire globe from the devastating impacts of climate change. Thank you, gentlemen, for creating time for us this morning. Unfortunately, we could not be joined by Elizabeth Wathuti, who is the lead coordinator, Africa Youth Climate Assembly, but hopefully we should be having another sit down and discussing this very important conversation. My name is Safina Chengoma. I was sitting in for Trevor Umbija. Thank you so much for creating time for Daybreak this morning. Have a good day ahead.